I am going to talk about some tips and tricks to strengthen your grant applications. It's almost like you just heard from me. I realize we're a little ahead of schedule. So I'll go through. The first tip that we have is to prepare early. And that means you will want to read and reread the RFA. So as you probably know by now, the RFA is our solicitation notice where we announce the availability of our funding. It's really important to note that each team has developed RFAs for each funding source that's administered. So our funding sources do have some different requirements. That's why we've discussed a little separately, not only in our funding priorities, but perhaps in our reporting. There may be additional attachments that are needed for one funding source over another, et cetera. So it's really important that you familiarize yourself with all of the requirements under the funding source or sources that you're interested in applying under. The RFA also has important dates, and I think that we share that in our presentation. I'll also share in just a moment. So it's really important to note that this year our application period has changed. So traditionally we were on a schedule from November 1st to January 31st. Beginning this year, we are accepting applications December 1st to January 31st. The RFA will be posted and available for review prior to that date. Again, our goal is to post it by the end of this week so that you can read all of the requirements and work toward developing your proposal. So again, this is posted online. We want to make sure that you have these dates. We've gone over a calendar in this presentation today. And we've also, again, included this inside of the request for applications. So our intention is to release our request for applications on November 1st. The application will open in EBS, our new grant management system, on December 1st. And the deadline to submit your applications is January 31st, 2025. And 2025 sounds like it's far, but it's really not. It's just around the corner. So if you would submit your application for consideration for funding by 11:59 p.m. Now, it's important to realize that staff will not be available until 11:59 p.m. I will repeat that staff will not be available to assist until 11:59 p.m. We will be working normal business hours, maybe some of us a little later. So that's why it's really important to start your application sooner than later. As I think Keon and Lindsay stated earlier, the commission votes for approved applications in June. And then we start this cycle kind of over again. So we'll have a grant award workshop where we discuss reporting requirements, and that's mandatory for funded programs. That's going to be September 2025. Our new award start dates are October 1st, 2025, with the exception of our Title II subawards, and those will open January 1st, 2026. So the RFA has a lot of information. So in a general sense, I'll go over what each section contains. It's organized so that you guys can utilize it in a way that's beneficial to supporting all of the process in submitting your application and developing your proposal. The introduction has a lot of information about the committees for each funding source and the standard eligibility guidelines. Section 1, which is grant information and conditions, has information about the specific grant program that you're looking to apply under and the important general requirements and processes. Section 2 is the program priorities. And again, this will list the funding priorities for each specific funding source and any additional application submission rules. So we've had some discussions. Some funding sources have a cost sharing or match requirement. Some don't. Some require additional documentation for funding sources and others don't. Section 3, the application access requirements, identifies the system requirements necessary for developing and submitting your application. This includes establishing an NCID and requesting access to the new grant management system, as we've discussed earlier in this presentation and Kevin did a demo of. Section 4 is the application guide with sample screens. Now, this section provides sample screens for navigating the application in our new grants management system. However, this is just a general overview designed to help get you started. As we've stated earlier today, there is a user manual that is located inside of the system that can also help you navigate the various areas of the grant management system. And then finally, our resources section is kind of a new and improved addition to our request for applications. We've identified various tools that might help shape your grant proposal and help you find different data sources or evidence-based and promising practices. So it's really important to go ahead and work toward getting your attachments in line. There are a number of documents listed within the RFA that are required as part of the application submission. Submission of your application without the required documentation may disqualify you from consideration for funding. Some documents may take some time to either develop or have approved by your agency's standards and chain of command. So it's really important to begin gathering this documentation early. Do note that each funding source has additional required documents that are called project-specific documents. These are, again, outlined in each individual request for applications book, and they're based on the funding source. So it's really important that you make sure you're submitting the correct documentation. This is a list of the required documents that we've called organization documents in the past. Kevin touched on some of this in his presentation. I think others have as well, but these are more defined inside of the request for applications. And if you'll note on this slide, the ones that are highlighted in the yellow color are for nonprofit agencies. So state and governmental agencies would not have to, submit or complete a 990 form or a 501c3 verification form. However, all other documents do apply. Sample forms can be found on the GCC website, and this includes all of the certification forms. This is on the form section of the website, and we have been staying on top of trying to update any forms. We can answer any questions that you may have about forms or direct you to the proper source. Next tip. Make system access a priority. We've talked about the various systems that you'll need access to in order to develop and submit your application. So don't wait until the last minute because there may be a lag, there may be things beyond our control that we're not necessarily aware of. GCC staff doesn't control any of these systems. So it's really important to note that if you call us at 11:59, the night that the application's due, one, you won't get an answer, but two, if you get an answer, we probably won't be able to help you navigate this issue. There are separate systems that you'll need to access, and again, we don't control them, so the instructions for accessing these systems are located inside of our request for applications. We do have a new grants management system, and it was discussed earlier today. NCID is still a requirement for accessing that system. So again, guidance for accessing each of these platforms can also be found on the in the grant information section of the GCC website. Again, while we're here to support you, we can't assist with the system issues. We might be able to provide some guidance like a click here or a click there, but anything beyond that, we're still learning on navigating, and that's why there's a help desk established. So note that there is guidance on navigating EBS in the RFA, and there's also, again, as I mentioned, a detailed training manual online that references the grant management system. And Kevin went through this form earlier, so I won't delay here. Also, though, it is important to note that your officials must have access to the system. So don't start an application and not have everyone have access. It's really important to identify the correct officials and have the right person in the right role. As with previous years, there are requirements for the roles where your officials that are associated with your application should fit. Depending on the type of agency and your internal processes, it may take a little more work to communicate with the necessary parties. So again, we emphasize start early, start early, start early. Note that the officials are also required to have established an NCID account and access to the EBS platform. Next tip, use available resources to benefit your program and community. So we want to emphasize community collaboration. Collaboration really is key to making these initiatives succeed. Your proposals will need data, and the RFA has that new section that contains resources, and I'll go over that in just a moment. So the GCC supports comprehensive projects that include collaborative partnerships, including partnerships with multiple agencies like human services agencies, court and criminal justice agencies, nonprofits, universities, and again, other community partners. What we like to see and need to see in application are illustrated, coordinated public and private efforts. There's been some discussion today and over time about funding levels changing, particularly funding decreasing. And so while scarce funding may increase competition for grants, this makes it even more necessary to collaborate with partners in your community in order to continue the delivery of services and resources across the state. So it's important to consider long-term sustainability, whether or not you're funded. How will you use new or existing resources to continue this project after the grant ends? Is there another source of funding that might be able to support your proposal? And how will you involve the community engaged decision makers in order to continue addressing community needs, the community needs that are identified in your proposal? As our criminal justice improvements team just stated, some of these projects are more defined as seed projects. And so we may only have a limited amount of funding to get your project started, but it could transition into a better program for your community. So it's really important that you're engaging policymakers and folks who have more money to give you than the GCC may. Include data wherever possible. So Michelle Beck from our Criminal Justice Analysis Center is going to close out the workshop on a presentation about data. She's the data expert. So I won't go too far in depth, but what we do like to see is the use of numbers, percentages, and ratios to strengthen your proposal. Using well-documented data from public databases, surveys, and or other internal and government agencies or research. And your data should define the problem that your project seeks to address. Now, I just referred to the new RFA resources section. This includes research and other resources, a glossary of terms, and a scoring matrix. The resource section, again, it includes many useful tools, and it also has information for contacting the EBS help desk, information regarding our frequently asked questions or our Q&A, and our summary of key dates. Under research and other resources, each RFA, so per funding source, has included links to external resources with specific research or guidance. These are designed to help strengthen the data and information included in your proposal, and many of these highlight evidence-based and promising programs that may be implemented in your communities. In addition, there's information about our Justice Data Portal, which again, I'm sure you'll hear about it in just a moment, and it's maintained by the Governor's Crime Commission's Criminal Justice Analysis Center. Again, these resources are specific to funding sources. So an example of this is our juvenile justice request for applications may have information about our state's juvenile justice system, our state's 3-year plan on juvenile justice, resources related to youth gang violence prevention, while VOCA and VAWA RFAs may include resources specific to domestic violence or sexual assault victim response. These resources are designed to help strengthen the data that you include in your proposal. And like I said, they highlight many different types of programs that have been implemented in communities that may be implemented in your own. Our next tip, the scoring matrix is your friend. We've included a scoring matrix that's quite detailed, and it's more like a rubric within the application. Essentially, it identifies scoring ranges to support your understanding for what makes a strong application versus an application that may not score as high. Please use this to your advantage and maximize the potential score for your application. Again, we are posting the request for applications about a month ahead of opening the application in the system. So you do have, some time to refer to these resources, to look at the scoring matrix, and to determine how to develop a very strong application that might be considered for funding. And here you'll see each of the sections that are going to be scored, as well as the character limit and the potential points. So the first part within the application is the project abstract, which briefly identifies the problem that you seek to address. That's 1,300 characters, and it has the potential for 20 points. We are looking at partners in collaboration, another 1,300 characters. And this has a potential for 10 points. The project narrative also has 1,300 characters and a potential for 30 points. The project timeline of activity details basically exactly what it says, the timeline for which you're going to implement your project. And that has a potential for 10 points. And then your goals and objectives are kind of inside of the system. Each project has to identify 2 goals and 2 objectives to accompany the goal. And that has a potential for 30 points. Goals and objectives must be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, or SMART. So in a broad sense, the goals are the general statements of what you seek to achieve, and the objectives describe how you will achieve the goals of the project. Please also include how you intend to evaluate your progress towards these goals. Funded projects report on the progress of their goals and objectives annually in what's called the GCC Progress Report. So this is for all projects. It points back to the information that you provide us. Now, there is also performance reporting that is required by each funding source, but in a general sense, we also want to know that you are accomplishing the goals that you set out to accomplish. And here is my last slide. It's really important to note that the application deadline is January 31st, 2025. So we've gone over quite a bit of resources that are available to you, including resources that are listed on areas of the GCC website. Inside of the RFA, which lists the eligibility conditions and program requirements, there is a listing of the key dates. Mark your calendars. It's important to note the supporting documents and go ahead and get started on them, as well as the resources section that the RFA has. Finally, another resource for you and available for your success is GCC staff. So if you have any questions specific to your funding source or about the application, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the planning team so that we can support you. And that is all that I have.